10 years ago, my wife ran off with my own brother. She left me a letter on the kitchen table and took everything else. That's how it began, a freezing dawn in Helena, Montana, the kind where the wind whistles through cracks in the windows and makes the whole town sound like it's morning. I woke before sunrise, same as every day. My hands already sore from the double shifts at Montana Alloy Works, the smell of machine. Oil still clung to my skin no matter how much soap I used. The plan that morning was simple. Get to work early, pick up an extra hour of overtime, then swing by the pharmacy for Lucas's inhaler refills. But fate had its own schedule. I stepped into the kitchen, rubbing my neck. The coffee machine blinked 5:06 a.m. The window glass was fogged, and for a moment, I could almost believe everything was normal, until I saw the folded letter on the table. Right next to it, my wife's wedding ring, and behind that, the half-empty cookie jar that once held our savings. My heart went cold. The note was written in Catalina's neat handwriting, the same one she used to write grocery lists and love notes before life started crushing us. "Alex, I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry. You deserve someone who can." At first I thought it was some kind of joke. Then I saw the name signed underneath. Catalina. And Mark. Mark, my younger brother. For a second the world tilted sideways. I grabbed the edge of the table just to stay upright. The sound of the wind outside mixed with the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. They didn't just leave. They drained the joint account. Every cent meant for Lucas's medicine, for rent, for food. That's when I heard a small cough from the next room. "Dad?" Lucas's weak voice carried through the hallway. I rushed in. His tiny frame was curled under the blanket, his breathing shallow, his fingers clutching the inhaler. He looked up at me, confusion in his eyes. "Where's Mom?" he asked between gasps. I couldn't speak. I just knelt beside him, pressing the inhaler to his lips, whispering, "Breathe, buddy." Deep breaths. His chest heaved, and the little hiss of medicine filled the room. When his breathing steadied, I tucked the blanket around him tighter. "Mom had to go out for a bit," I lied softly. "You just rest, okay?" He nodded, trusting me completely. That was the moment my heart broke for real. A few hours later, I went to my parents' house. I needed help, or maybe just someone to say, "I'm sorry." My mother opened the door. She already knew. The look on her face told me Mark had been there. "Mom," I said, voice shaking. Catalina left. With Mark. She took everything. She cut me off, folding her arms. "Maybe if you treated her better, she wouldn't have." It hit like a slap. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. My father stepped out from behind her, his voice low and sharp. "Son, you've always been stubborn. Catalina just wanted more than this small-town misery. You can't blame your brother for that." I stared at them, waiting for 1 ounce of sympathy. There was none. "You're defending them?" I asked, incredulous. Dad's jaw tightened. "We're saying you should have seen it coming." I stood there, the cold wind cutting across the porch, my heart cracking open in ways I didn't think possible. For the first time in my life, I realized I was completely alone. That night, Lucas's cough came back worse than ever. He woke up gasping, tears streaming down his cheeks. I panicked, fumbling with the inhaler, whispering prayers under my breath. His breaths came ragged, shallow, then finally they eased. When he fell asleep again, I sat beside his bed in the dim glow of the lamp, staring at the shadows on the wall. The house felt emptier than ever. Catalina's easel stood in the corner, one of her half-finished paintings. Still on it, a swirl of blue and gold, she once said reminded her of hope. I wanted to smash it, but instead I sat there, holding my son's hand, whispering, "We'll make it through this, kiddo. I promise." Outside, the snow started falling again, soft and silent. The world didn't care that everything I had was gone. But I did, and that night, as Lucas breathed quietly beside me, I swore to myself I would never be weak again. Not for Catalina, not for Mark, not even for my parents. They thought I'd collapse. They thought I'd never get back up. They were wrong. Because the fire that night didn't burn me down. It forged me. They say Montana winters can kill a man if his heart isn't warm enough. Mine wasn't warm at all that year. It was fire and ice, burning with anger, freezing with loneliness. The morning after Catalina left, I called in sick. Truth was, I couldn't face the factory. Our apartment felt too quiet. The clock ticked loud, and every corner whispered her name. Her mug still sat in the sink. Her scarf hung on the chair. And that painting, the swirl of blue and gold, stared back at me like it knew I'd failed her. But there was no time for grief. Lucas woke up wheezing again. His medicine bottle was nearly empty, and the pharmacy refused to fill a new prescription until I paid the overdue balance. Catalina had cleaned out the account, down to the last cent. So I did the only thing left to do. I went to work. The factory roared like a beast when I stepped inside. Montana Alloy Works, a place where metal screamed, steam hissed, and men vanished into noise. I remember the heat slamming into my face as I walked past the furnaces, the smell of burning grease and hot steel thick in the air. My supervisor, Greg, saw me. He frowned. "Alex, you look like hell." "I need every hour you can give me," I said flatly. He hesitated, then nodded. "You can take the graveyard shift, too. Pays double on weekends." Perfect. And that's how it started, my double life. By day, I was Lucas's father. By night, I was a machine. I'd come home at dawn, hands trembling from the vibration of the drills, arms sore from hauling steel. Lucas would be sitting at the kitchen table, cereal half-eaten, his small inhaler beside him. He'd look up and smile. "Morning, Dad." And somehow that smile made the world bearable again. We learned to live with less. No TV, no takeout, no heat some nights. I patched the old radiator with tape and prayer. Lucas learned to sleep under 2 blankets, his little head buried beneath them, like a turtle hiding from the world. Sometimes, I'd catch him drawing on old newspaper sheets with a dull pencil. Robots, trucks, even his mom. One day I asked him why he drew her. He looked up, innocent eyes full of something too old for his age. "So I don't forget her face," he said. I went to the bathroom and cried silently, then wiped my eyes and went back to fix the broken toaster. Months passed. Lucas's asthma attacks came and went like storms. Each one chipped away at me, but also shaped me. I stopped hoping Catalina would return. I stopped expecting an apology from my parents. The only thing I cared about was keeping that boy alive and giving him a chance at something better. I sold my tools to pay medical bills. Then I borrowed others from coworkers to keep working. Greg, that old supervisor, used to say, "You've got stubborn bones, Grant." He didn't know stubborn was all I had left. There were nights I'd fall asleep sitting upright in the kitchen chair, grease still on my hands, head against the wall. Lucas would find me like that and gently put his blanket over my shoulders. Once I woke up to see him doing it, his small face serious, focused. He whispered, "Don't worry, Dad. One day I'll take care of you." That sentence burned itself into my memory, because he meant it, and someday he would. The seasons kept turning. Winter bled into spring, then back into another winter. Year after year, the snow piled outside. But inside our home, there was something stronger growing. Resilience. By the time Lucas turned 12, he was taller, stronger, though the wheeze still haunted him sometimes. He helped me around the shop during school breaks, polishing wrenches, handing me bolts, asking endless questions about engines. He had the same focus Catalina once had when she painted. But his came from grit, not dreams. I used to watch him quietly while we worked. Every time he coughed, my heart clenched. Every time he laughed, it unclenched again. That boy was my proof that life didn't end when someone broke you. It just changed shape. But no matter how far we got from that morning, there were nights when I'd still wake up thinking I heard her voice. Sometimes I'd find the old painting in the closet, brush off the dust and stare at it, that swirl of blue and gold. She used to say, "It's the color of hope." Now it just looked like the color of lies. Still, I couldn't throw it away. Not yet. Because deep down I think I was waiting, not for her, but for the day when fate would circle back around. And when it did, I wanted to be ready. One bitter night, while tightening bolts under a crane at work, Greg said something that stuck with me. "You know, Alex, people who leave always think they're escaping something. But life's funny. It's got a way of bringing them right back to where they started." At the time, I laughed it off. But years later, his words would echo like prophecy, because life did bring them back. Catalina, my brother Mark, the ones who left us in the cold. They came back, and they had no idea the kind of man I'd become. 10 years. It's strange how time moves. Slow when you're suffering, fast when you're surviving. Montana still had its brutal winters, but they didn't scare me anymore. By then, I'd learned how to fight the cold, not with money, but with work, purpose, and a boy who'd grown into a man far too early. Lucas was 19 now. Tall, lean, sharp-eyed. The kind of kid who carried both his mother's gentleness and my stubbornness. His asthma still lingered, but he'd learned how to manage it. The inhaler was now a habit, not a fear. He was studying mechanical engineering at the local college and on a Scholarship he earned by building a model turbine out of scrap metal. When I saw his name printed in the local paper under Young Innovators of Montana, I bought 5 copies. I didn't cry, not openly, but my chest felt full in a way it hadn't for years. Our apartment was still small, still noisy from the old heater, but it was ours. Every dent in the wall, every patch on the floorboard told our story. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. And for a man who'd once watched everything he loved walk away, peace was the rarest luxury of all. That peace didn't last. It was a Saturday morning when the first crack appeared. I was under the hood of a truck at my small workshop, a garage I'd built after saving for nearly a decade. The sign above it read, Grant & Son Repairs. It wasn't fancy, but locals trusted us. We didn't cheat anyone, didn't cut corners, and we never turned away someone who couldn't pay in full. I was wiping my hands when I heard the growl of an engine outside, deeper, smoother than anything from around here. When I looked up, a black Mercedes-Benz rolled to a stop in front of my shop. Out stepped a man in a tailored coat, sunglasses, confident smile. He looked around like he owned the world, and then he took them off. My stomach dropped. Mark, my younger brother, the man who'd stolen my wife and my savings. He hadn't aged a day, except the arrogance on his face had settled into something permanent. Before I could even process it, the passenger door opened. A woman stepped out. Her hair was shorter now, dyed chestnut instead of brown. She wore diamonds that sparkled under the weak Montana sun. But her eyes, those blue, distant eyes, I'd know them anywhere. Catalina! For a second, the world went quiet. The only thing I could hear was my heartbeat. She looked at me like I was a ghost she hadn't expected to see again. Mark, on the other hand, grinned like this was some kind of reunion. Well, well, he said, stepping forward. If it isn't Big Brother. Still covered in grease, I see. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. Mark, I said evenly. What are you doing here? Passing through, he said, glancing at Catalina. We've been living in Seattle. Business trip brought us close. Thought we'd stop by, see how you're holding up. I looked at their shiny car, their polished shoes, their smug faces, and every word felt like acid. Seems like you're holding up better than me, I said coldly. Catalina's lips curved faintly. You always like to play the martyr, Alex. Her voice still had that soft, artistic lilt, but the warmth was gone. She glanced around the garage, her gaze landing on the sign above. Grant & Son, she murmured. So, you managed after all. I didn't manage, I said quietly. I built. Mark chuckled. Still dramatic, huh? You could have joined me, you know. You had talent. Instead, you stayed here, fixing tractors for pocket change. Someone had to stay and raise your nephew, I said, meeting his eyes. That wiped the smirk off his face for a second. At that moment, Lucas walked out from the back room, wiping oil from his hands. He froze when he saw them. Dad? I could see the realization dawn in his eyes, the shape of Catalina's face, the faint resemblance in Mark's jawline. Lucas's lips parted, his voice trembling. Mom? Catalina's eyes softened, only slightly. Lucas, you've grown so much. She took a hesitant step forward, but he stepped back. You left us, he said flatly. The words were sharp, not shouted, but heavy enough to make her flinch. She began, but he cut her off. No, you don't get to explain now. He turned and walked out of the garage. I stood there silent, watching the woman who once painted hope into every canvas. Looked like she'd seen her own ghost. Mark cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Well, that went well. He smirked again. Anyway, we're hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. Big event. Thought we'd invite you both. Old times' sake. I stared at him, trying to understand the game. Why? He shrugged. Publicity. We're expanding our company into Montana. Good press if the family's united. There it was. He didn't come here for closure. He came for image. I forced a polite smile. Sure, I said. We'll come. He grinned, satisfied, and they got back into their car. The Mercedes glided away, leaving tire tracks in the slush, like scars across my doorstep. That evening, Lucas came back to the shop. His jaw was tight, his eyes fierce. I don't want to see them again, he said. I know, I replied. But sometimes you have to look your ghosts in the eye. He looked at me for a long moment. You're planning something, aren't you? I didn't answer. Just looked out the window where the sun was setting over the snow. For 10 years I'd lived quietly, humbly. But seeing them again, the arrogance, The fake smiles. The way they treated pain like a game. It stirred something I thought I'd buried forever. The fire was back. Not anger. Purpose. Yeah, I finally said. I'm planning something. The next evening, Montana dressed up in lights. The snow that had blanketed the streets all week had begun to glisten under the flood of headlights heading toward the new luxury resort on the outskirts of town, the Evergreen Summit. It was the kind of place that didn't belong in our town. Too polished, too fake, too loud, and it was exactly the kind of place Mark and Catalina would choose to celebrate themselves. I parked our old truck near the edge of the property. It looked out of place beside the rows of luxury cars, BMWs, Audis, even a Bentley. Lucas stood beside me, wearing a simple black suit. It wasn't fancy, but he made it look dignified. His expression, though, was guarded, like he was walking into enemy territory. You sure about this? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said, adjusting my tie. Sometimes to end a storm, you have to walk into it. He exhaled and nodded. Then let's finish this. The moment we walked into the hall, all eyes turned. The place shimmered, chandeliers, champagne, people dressed in arrogance and perfume. At the far end of the room stood Mark, shaking hands with businessmen, laughing too loud, too confidently, and beside him Catalina, in a flowing silver gown that caught the light like liquid. She looked untouched by time, but I could see it, the faint weariness in her posture, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes. Regret has a way of shadowing even the brightest faces. When she spotted me across the room, her smile faltered for just a second. Mark followed her gaze and smirked. He raised his glass in mock salute. I ignored the whispers as we walked in, the murmurs of, "That's Alex Grant." Didn't he used to be? Yes, I used to be a man they could laugh at. But tonight wasn't about shame. It was about balance. I stopped by the buffet table, scanning the room. Lucas, sharp as ever, had already slipped away, blending into the crowd. We'd discussed everything the night before. How Mark's company, Grant Tech Industries, had used manipulated property deals to take over the land I'd once worked on. How he'd stolen not just my family, but the legacy of my work. What Mark didn't know was that Lucas had found the cracks. All those engineering papers, all that software knowledge. He'd traced the fraudulent patents and unregistered accounts. Tonight, we weren't just attending a gala. We were holding the detonator. Alex! Mark's voice cut through the music. He approached, all smiles and fake warmth. He clapped a hand on my shoulder like we were old friends. You made it! Didn't think you'd actually come. Wouldn't miss it, I said, smiling thinly. Family event, right? He laughed, loud enough for people nearby to notice. Still that dry humor. You haven't changed. He motioned toward Catalina. You remember my wife? She stepped forward hesitantly. Hello, Alex. For a moment, everything around us blurred. The laughter, the music, the chatter. It was just her and me, two people standing on the ruins of what once was love. You look, she began, then stopped herself. Older. I smirked. That happens when you don't trade in your conscience. Her lips parted slightly, hurt flashing in her eyes. But before she could answer, Mark interrupted. Well, Alex, you'll be pleased to know our little empire's growing. We're launching a new line next month. Clean energy, big investors. Maybe your son could intern with us, if he's not too busy fixing tractors. The jab was deliberate. I didn't react, just tilted my head. Funny you mention energy. I hear your new plant's running on. Borrowed ideas. He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled. Oh, nothing. Just small-town gossip. But I could see it, a flicker of uncertainty behind his confident mask. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed. The announcer stepped up to the stage, tapping the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Grant Tech Annual Charity Gala. Tonight we celebrate innovation, family, and legacy. Mark took the stage, his ego practically glowing. He started his speech, smooth, rehearsed, dripping with self-praise. He talked about family values, forgiveness, building a better tomorrow. And as I listened, I felt something inside me finally break. This man, the same one who betrayed blood, stole love, and left us to rot, now stood in front of hundreds of people preaching morality. Enough. While the crowd applauded, I caught Lucas's subtle nod from the far side of the room. He'd done it. Every file, every hidden transaction, every fake patent uploaded, scheduled and ready to go. At exactly 9:00 p.m., the truth would hit every screen in this hall. I walked toward the back of the room where Catalina stood. watching her husband like she didn't recognize him anymore. When she saw me, her eyes glistened. "Alex," she whispered, "what are you doing?" "Ending this," I said simply. She shook her head, voice trembling. "You don't understand. If this goes wrong, Mark will destroy you." I smiled faintly. "He already did. I'm just returning the favor." And then it happened. The massive LED screen behind Mark flickered mid-sentence. His presentation froze, then glitched, and suddenly, files began flashing across the screen. Bank statements, emails, signed documents showing patent theft, employee blackmail, and money laundering. The entire hall went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the speakers, the soft clink of a dropped glass. Mark froze. "Turn it off now." Security scrambled, but it was too late. Lucas had mirrored the feed across the venue network. The crowd began murmuring. Anger, disbelief, shock. Phones came out, cameras rolled. Everything he'd built was unraveling in front of him. Mark turned toward me, his face twisted in rage. "You did this," he shouted. I didn't move. I just looked him in the eyes and said quietly, "No, Mark, you did this. 10 years ago when you chose greed over family." He lunged forward, but security held him back. Catalina stood frozen, tears welling, as the empire she'd chosen over love burned down in real time. I turned and walked away, through the crowd, through the chaos, through the echoes of gasps and flashing cameras. Lucas joined me near the exit. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with something between shock and pride. "It's over," he said softly. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "It's just beginning." The next morning, the whole town buzzed with one name, Mark Grant. By sunrise, every local news channel, every business blog, every social feed was flooded with his downfall. Montana business tycoon exposed for fraud and patent theft. The empire he'd built on stolen bones had cracked overnight. Mark's company shares plummeted, his investors withdrew, and the authorities began knocking on his doors before he could even pour his morning whiskey. For 10 years I had lived under the weight of his betrayal. But that morning, as I stood by the window of our small home, coffee in hand, watching the soft snow drift down over Helena, I didn't feel triumph. I felt hollow. Lucas came in quietly, still in his pajamas, scrolling through his phone. "Dad," he said, "it's everywhere." "They're done." "Completely done." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the window. "Good," I murmured, but the word felt heavy. He frowned. "You don't sound happy." I turned toward him. His face, so young, yet carrying so much fire, reminded me of myself before the bitterness set in. "I'm proud of you, son," I said softly. "You did what no one else could. You gave me justice." Lucas stared at me for a moment before replying, "Yeah, justice." But the way he said it, quiet, almost uncertain, stuck with me. By noon, the police had raided Mark's mansion. Footage leaked online, boxes of files being hauled away, the luxury cars being impounded, Catalina being escorted out, eyes red, wrapped in a coat too thin for the cold. The same woman who once left a note on our kitchen table now stood outside. Her mansion, silent, broken. I thought seeing her like that would make me feel vindicated, but instead I felt something twist deep in my chest. Not pity, not forgiveness, just a quiet ache that comes when you realize the past never truly leaves you. A few days later, I was called into the police station as a witness. I gave my statement, confirmed what we'd found, and left. Everything was clean. Everything was legal. But the town had already chosen sides. And Helena wasn't big enough to forget a scandal that big. Half the people treated me like a hero. The other half whispered that I'd ruined my own brother. At the mechanic shop, I could feel the shift. Coworkers stopped mid-conversation when I walked in. Customers stared too long. One of the guys, Pete, tried to make small talk. "Heard your brother's going to prison. You must feel good, huh?" I just tightened a wrench and said quietly, "No one wins when a family falls apart, Pete." That evening, as the snowstorm thickened, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there she was. "Catalina!" She looked nothing like the woman from the gala. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair damp from the snow. She clutched a small bag, trembling slightly. "Alex," she whispered. "Can I come in?" For a moment I didn't move. Then I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her gaze drifting around the room. The same old furniture, the same faded curtains she used to complain about. "This place hasn't changed," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "Some things don't need to." We sat at the table where she once left that letter a decade ago. Lucas was out with friends, which was probably for the best. She finally spoke, voice breaking. I didn't know it would come to this. Mark told me he'd make things better, that we'd help you in the end. But he changed. He wasn't the same man I thought I ran away with. I leaned back, folding my arms. You knew what he did to me, Catalina. To us, you just didn't care back then. Tears welled in her eyes. I was young, stupid. I thought love was supposed to be exciting. I didn't see how real love looks when it's tired and working. Double shifts to buy medicine. Her words hit harder than I expected. Because somewhere deep inside I knew she wasn't completely wrong. I had buried myself in work and survival, and maybe I'd stopped seeing her too. But forgiveness? That was still a mountain too high. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside, the check, a large one. This is everything I have left, she said. I sold what I could. It's for Lucas, for his future. Please, let me do at least that much. I looked at the check, then at her. No amount of money can erase what happened. I know, she whispered, but it's all I have to give. I hesitated, then pushed it back toward her. Keep it, you'll need it more than we do. Her lip quivered. Why are you being kind to me now after everything I did? I met her eyes. Because hate's a poison, Catalina. I drank it long enough. I'm done. That night after she left, Lucas came home and found me sitting at the table. He noticed the untouched cup of coffee, the silence. She came here, didn't she? He asked. Yeah. He sat down beside me. I saw people online calling us heroes. But it doesn't feel like we won, does it? I smiled faintly. Son, winning isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's just about not becoming them. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Outside, the snow kept falling. Quiet, endless, forgiving. It had been 3 weeks since the gala. 3 quiet, heavy weeks. Helena was blanketed in snow, its streets silent under the weight of everything that had happened. Mark's name had become a ghost, whispered in grocery lines, murmured in bars, used as a cautionary tale by the old-timers who liked to say, greed doesn't die easy. It just freezes slower up here. I'd gone back to work at the shop. Days felt simple again. Engines, grease, the steady hum of machines. Lucas went back to his classes. Life was finding rhythm again, or so I thought. Until one night there was a knock at the door. It was late, past midnight, and the kind of cold that could bite bone. I opened it, expecting maybe a drunk neighbor or a delivery mistake. But it wasn't either. It was Mark. He stood there in the snow, unshaven, eyes hollow. His expensive coat was gone, replaced by a worn jacket. The man who once strutted through gala halls now looked like someone the world had chewed up and spat out. Alex, he rasped. Can I come in? Every instinct screamed no. But something about the way he said my name, like he was barely holding himself together, made me hesitate. I stepped aside. Close the door. He entered slowly, shivering, his breath visible in the cold air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sank into the chair across from me, the same chair Catalina had sat in weeks before. You ruined me, he said finally, voice trembling. I didn't flinch. You ruined yourself, Mark. I just turned on the light. He let out a bitter laugh. You think this makes you better than me? You think you won? I didn't come here to win, I said quietly. I came here to stop losing. He leaned forward, eyes bloodshot. You think you've got the moral high ground. You destroyed my company. My wife left me. I've got nothing. I looked at him. The brother I once built snow forts with, shared birthdays with, laughed with, now just a man hollowed out by greed. You had everything, Mark, I said, voice tightening. You took my family, my savings, my peace, and when that wasn't enough, you tried to take my dignity too. So don't stand there crying about losses you chose. He slammed his fist on the table. You think I wanted this life? You think I didn't love her? I stared at him, really stared. For the first time, I saw not anger in his eyes, but pain. A pain that looked a lot like mine from 10 years ago. He exhaled shakily. I've been sleeping in motels. No one wants to talk to me. My partner's dropped me. Catalina. She won't answer my calls. He paused. I heard she came here. You forgave her? Forgiveness isn't a gift, Mark. It's a decision. I decided not to let her destroy me twice. He looked down. Then maybe I came here for the same reason. I frowned. What do you want, Mark? He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and slid an old photo across the table. It was from years ago, the 3 of us at the lake. Me, Catalina, and him, smiling. Before everything fell apart, "I don't know who I am anymore," he said, voice cracking. "All I know is that I miss my brother." For a long moment I said nothing. The clock ticked softly. The wind howled outside. Then I finally spoke. "The brother I had died the day you walked away." He looked up at me, broken. "Then what do I do now?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I can't tell you how to fix what you broke, Mark, but if you want to start, go to the police. Tell them everything. Stop hiding behind excuses." He shook his head weakly. "They'll lock me up." "Maybe," I said, "but at least you'll finally be honest. For once." He sat there, silent, tears forming in his eyes. Then he stood up slowly. "I didn't come here to beg, Alex. I came to say, I'm sorry." I froze. He'd never said that word in his life, not once. "I'm sorry for what I did to you. To Lucas, to her. I thought taking what you had would fill the hole in me, but it just made it deeper." I nodded slowly. "You can't change the past, Mark, but you can stop running from it." He gave a small, hollow smile. "Maybe that's what I'll do." He turned and walked toward the door. Snow blew in as he opened it. Before stepping out, he looked back one last time. "I meant it, you know," he said quietly. "You were always the better man." Then he disappeared into the storm. I stood there for a long while, watching the flakes swirl into darkness, wondering if that was the last time I'd ever see him. A week later, I got a call from the sheriff. They'd found Mark's car near the edge of a frozen lake. Inside, a note, short, written in shaky ink. "Tell Alex I'm sorry. Tell Lucas he's lucky to have a father like him." The silence that followed that call was heavier than any noise could have been. Lucas came home that night to find me sitting by the window again, staring out into the storm. He asked softly, "Dad, was it him?" I nodded. He sat beside me quietly, resting his head on my shoulder. After a while, he said, "Do you think people like him can find peace?" I took a deep breath. "I think peace doesn't come from being perfect, son. It comes from finally being honest, even if it's too late." That night, the snow finally stopped. The world outside looked clean, untouched, almost new. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt something close to peace. Not the loud kind that comes with revenge, but the quiet kind that comes when you finally let go. A month had passed since Mark's car was pulled from the frozen lake. Helena had gone eerily quiet again, the kind of silence that follows a storm too big to name. Life went on, as it always does, but inside me something shifted. I didn't wake up angry anymore. I didn't fall asleep replaying old memories like broken film reels. I worked, I came home, I cooked dinner for Lucas, who was now taller than me, and life began to feel normal. Until one evening, when a letter arrived. It was delivered by the county sheriff himself. A heavy brown envelope sealed in evidence tape. He handed it to me gently and said, "We found this in your brother's glove compartment. Thought you should have it." I stood there, frozen, as the snow fell lightly behind him. Mark's handwriting was scrawled across the front. "For Alex and Lucas." I waited until night to open it. Lucas sat across the table, his eyes curious but cautious. Inside was a folded letter, worn and slightly smudged from damp. I unfolded it carefully, my hands trembling as if I already knew the words would cut deep. It began simply, no greetings, no drama, just truth. "Alex, if you're reading this, it means I finally did something right. I stopped running. I've spent 10 years trying to prove that I was better than you. But the truth is, I always admired you. You were the one who stayed, who fought, who loved. I stole from you not because I hated you, but because I hated myself. I saw everything I wasn't when I looked at you." I paused, swallowing hard. Lucas watched quietly, his expression unreadable. Catalina never wanted things to end this way. She believed we could fix it someday, but I dragged her down with me. "Don't blame her anymore." "Alex, she loved you in her own way. She just got lost in my storm." I did too. My vision blurred for a moment. I blinked back the tears and kept reading. "Lucas, I owe you an apology too. I watched you grow from afar. Every picture your father posted, every award your school gave you. You became the kind of man I never was. I know nothing I say will matter now, but I want you to know, you're proof that our bloodline isn't cursed by betrayal. You broke the cycle." At the bottom of the letter was a small key taped to the page. Under it, one final line. "Go to the old cabin near Lake Alstrom. You'll understand." The next morning, Lucas and I drove out there. The cabin was small, weathered, and surrounded by frozen pines. The last time I'd seen it was when Mark and I were kids. We used to fish here with Dad. The door creaked open easily with the key. Inside, everything smelled of dust and old wood. There was a single box on the table. Inside it, folders, documents, and a small envelope labeled for Lucas. I handed it to my son, watching as he opened it. Inside were college bonds, savings certificates, and a note in Mark's shaky handwriting. "This is for your future, kid. Don't let your father refuse it. He's too proud for his own good. I made enough mistakes for 2 generations. Don't let my name end with shame. Build something good out of my ashes." Lucas's eyes filled with tears. He looked at me, voice cracking. "Dad, he left this for me." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, son." I guess this was his way of saying sorry. We spent hours at the cabin that day, going through Mark's files, letters, journals, sketches of projects he'd planned before everything fell apart. It was strange, seeing the man behind the monster. He wasn't pure evil, just lost, broken in ways I'd never noticed. As the sun began to set, Lucas walked down to the frozen lake, the wind brushing his hair back. I joined him quietly. He looked out over the ice, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever miss him?" I took a deep breath. "Every day. But I miss who he was, not who he became." He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I think he wanted to be good again at the end." "Maybe he was," I said softly. "Maybe all of this, was his way of finding peace." We stood there for a long time, just the two of us, the snow falling gently, the world finally quiet. When we turned to leave, I glanced back one last time at that cabin, at the life that could have been, at the ghosts that finally felt ready to rest. As we drove home, Lucas looked over and said, "Dad, you were right all along." "About what?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Winning isn't about destroying someone. It's about surviving with your soul still intact." I looked at him, my son, my reason, my second chance, and felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. That night I placed Mark's letter in the old family photo album, right between the picture of us as kids and the one of Lucas as a baby. Because history isn't just what we inherit, it's what we choose to forgive. And for the first time in 10 years, I slept without dreams, just peace.